Hi, it's Jamie from Guildbrook Farm, and I'm going to show you guys how to can some soup today. So let me share with you guys what I've been up to. Over the last couple of weeks, I have been canning soup like crazy. I have ham and bean, I have Senate bean, I have ham and pea soup, I have ham, potato, and corn, and then I have ham and green bean and potato soup, which is a German recipe. Last year, sometime around November, I canned all this ham. I got it on sale, really cheap, and I saved all the ham bones. Anytime that you guys go and buy some sort of meat, and always try and get the bone, don't get the boneless hams, because those bones can be used to make delicious soup. And you might not be able to make it right away, but if you put it in a bag and put it in the freezer, you can pull it out one day, like I just did, and make a ton of good soup. So today I'm going to make some more ham and bean soup. I'm actually going to make another batch of this, which is potato and corn and ham soup. So I'm going to take you upstairs, we're going to put some on, I'm going to show you how to do it. Alright, here's one of our ham bones that I saved from 11 of 16. A little bit freezer burnt, but it'll be all right. It'll turn out perfect. And you can see that there's, it's mostly bone, but there will be enough ham on here to make a delicious soup. And this will probably make somewhere around 5 quarts. So we're gonna take it over and put it in our crock pot. Now we're just gonna take this and fill it up with hot water. Now I'm just going to turn this on medium, and I'm not going to add anything to this. Just going to let it cook overnight, and tomorrow morning we're going to come back, we're going to pick all that meat off the bone, and we're going to strain out any of the solids that are left in the broth, and I'll show you how to finish up this recipe. Alright, so our ham bone has been cooking in the crock pot since yesterday. A lot of times I just put it in at night before bedtime, and then I start making my soup in the morning. It really doesn't matter. If you leave it in a little extra, no, not a big deal, but usually around 8 hours is what you want. Now I'm going to take the ham bone out, I'm going to pick it clean, pull off all of the meat, and discard all of the gristle and fat and bones, and then we're going to go ahead and strain it and then make our soup. Alright, so I like to cut this ham up on a pan. It just makes it easier because there's more space, and also the edges keep the juices from rolling out on the floor. I'm putting these into 3 piles. The one is the pile that I'm going to discard, and the other is the pile that I'm going to keep, and then this little pile over here, chicken food. You see we got quite a bit of ham off of that bone, so cooking it down in the crock pot overnight really makes it real nice and soft, and it all falls apart, so you're able to pick it pretty clean. I put all the little meaty bits that have like some fat on it over here off to the side for the birds. And we're just going to scoop that in a little cup for them. Anything real fatty like that, I'm not going to give them. I want to give them just like the little meaty bits that I don't want to put in my soup. And then this will be discarded, and this will go in our soup. We're going to take this out to the birds. Alright, so now we're going to strain out any other little extra bits that might be in the stock. So you can see these are the little bits that we strained out. You don't want that floating around in your soup or your stock. So you definitely want to strain this out. Now, what you have right here is a ham stock. Now you can take this, allow it to cool, and then put it in your refrigerator overnight, and it'll form, all the fat will rise to the top, and you can pull that off and create a low fat stock if you want. I personally don't do that. I like the added fat and flavor in soups, so I leave mine in, but that's just an option if you wanted to do that. Now from here, you can actually just go ahead and can the stock as is. You can add a little bit of salt if you want to, whatever you want to season it, or you can just can it plain and then season it when you're done, and you have just a plain old stock that you can use for whatever you want. But we're gonna go ahead and turn this into soup, and then we're gonna can the soup. And the type of soup that I'm making today is going to be potato, ham, and corn. And what I have here is canned potatoes. I have tons of these that I canned from my potatoes that were starting to get a little wrinkly in the basement. So I have tons of these. I'm going to use these in my soup. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this soup a little bit creamier by blending up in a blender 1 jar of these, just to kind of give it a little creamy texture. Just putting a little bit of broth in here to make it blend a little easier. I'm just rinsing out my blender. I'm gonna add in some carrots, because why not? I'm gonna add in some frozen corn. That's in an old banana nut bag. It's not banana nut bread. Not really measuring here. I'm gonna put my ham in. And now I'm just gonna cover it with my stock. All right, now our soup needs a little bit of aromatics, so I'm going to use some onions. If you don't have fresh onions, you can use dehydrated onions. I've used these in my soup multiple times when I ran out of onions, but today I just so happen to have an onion. So I'm just gonna saute this up, and then I'm gonna add it to my soup. And I'm probably gonna put some garlic powder in as well. And then salt and pepper to season it. We're gonna let it cook down, and then we're gonna can it. Okay, our onions are done. We're just gonna add this to our soup. Not burn ourselves. Little garlic powder. Little salt. Some pepper. Little parsley. A lot of parsley. Splash of apple cider vinegar for some acidity. That's for flavor, not for canning. And we're just gonna give it a stir. I'm gonna let that cook for about an hour. Just let all the flavors meld together before I go ahead and can it. All right, so let's talk about canning soup. Now is the perfect time to be canning soup. It's fall and it's starting to get a little bit cooler, and it's so easy to just go down in the basement or wherever you have your pantry and to just open up a jar of soup and heat it up real quick and eat it. And I love canning soup for that particular reason, just for the convenience of coming in from a cold day and having something really quick to heat up. All right, so let's talk about canning soup. Basically, you can use any recipe that you want as long as you follow a few rules that are super important. Number one, all soup needs to be pressure canned. That means you need to use a pressure canner, not a water bath canner. The number one question that I get when it comes to canning is, how do I know whether to use a water bath canner or a pressure canner? Well, you have to go to an authoritative website such as the National Center for Home Food Preservation. I'm going to leave that link down below. Make sure you bookmark it. And when you go on to whatever it is that you want to can that day, say it is a meat soup like we have here, you go under meat soup and it'll tell you pressure canner. There's no option there for water bath canning, so you know that that particular recipe needs to be pressure canned. All soup needs to be pressure canned. I know someone's going to ask me about tomato soup. Yes, tomato soup needs to be pressure canned as well. All right, so let's talk about the rules. So one, you have to have a pressure canner. It's a low acid food. Two, you cannot can any kind of pasta or rice. The reason for that is because it gets all soggy. You can't can anything that has dairy or any kind of creamer in it, so any kind of bisque or anything like that. You're going to want to leave that out of the recipe when you go to can it. You can't can anything that is too thick. So if you like, say, a really nice thick butternut squash soup, you're going to want to make it super thin so you can can it. You can't can anything thick because it doesn't bubble and turn over enough. It could explode in the canner. Nothing too thick. You can't add any kind of thickener to soup that you're canning. So for example, if you're making stew, just don't add the flour when you're canning it. You can add it after when you go to reheat it up, when you go to open up your can jars. And then finally, you want to make sure that everything is cooked before you go to can it. So for example, if you're using any kind of dried beans or peas in your soup, you want to make sure that everything is fully rehydrated and cooked and ready to go, because say for example, beans, you don't want them rehydrating while you're canning, otherwise they could explode in your canner and that's bad. And that's it. So as long as you follow those rules, no thickeners, make sure it's not too thick of a soup. General rule of thumb is half solids, half liquids. Make sure that you don't use any creams or dairy stuff, no pasta, no rice, any of that kind of stuff. If you guys still want that, you can still add it to your soup when you go to eat it. So you have all these jars stored in your pantry. When you go to open one up and you go to reheat it, that's when you can add your thickener for your stew. That's when you can add your pasta. That's when you can add any of your creams or anything like that. So just can it without that stuff. Super easy. We're gonna let this cook for about an hour and then we're gonna can it and I'll show you how. All right, so we're ready to can our soup. I have our pressure canner here filled with 2 inches of water. This is an All-American 921 pressure canner. This will hold up to 7 quarts of soup. We're gonna go ahead and put some oil around the rim. If you guys are new to canning, you're going to want to watch our Canning 101 video, which goes through all the reasons why I add some oil to the lid. It talks about removing the rings. It talks about liquid loss and all different kinds of questions you might have on pressure canning. So review that before you start canning. In addition, we have our jars. I'm going to be canning these in quart jars today. It doesn't matter what size lid for the soup. I have some large, I have some small. They do not need to be sterilized as long as you are pressure canning or water bath canning for a minimum of 10 minutes, but the jars do need to be cleaned. And if your jars are cold, you're gonna wanna warm them up by running them under some hot water. That's so the jars don't crack when you go to add the hot soup. You're gonna want a funnel. You're going to want some lids that match the size jars that you have. I do recycle my lids. Again, if you guys are curious about that, you can watch our Canning 101 video. And no, I do not sterilize them in water. And then I have my bubble remover tool and some matching rims. All right, in order to find out our processing times, we're going to go to the National Center for Home Food Preservation website. We're going to go to canning. We're going to go down to meat and meat products, and under there you can see we have soup. We're going to click on soup, and as you can see, it gives you instructions for canning soup. Caution, do not add noodles or other pasta, rice, flour, cream, milk, or other thickening agents. If dried beans or peas are used, they must be fully rehydrated. There's your warning in case you guys need to be reminded about what you can and can't add to soups. Other than that, you can add whatever spices or anything else that you want. And if you look down on the table, you can see that there is instructions for both a dial gauge and a weighted gauge pressure canner. For the All-American, we always follow the weighted gauge, and we are canning quarts. You can see our processing time for this type of soup is 75 minutes and at 10 pounds of pressure because we are under 1,000 feet. I just want to note the asterisk there that if you are canning a seafood, there is additional time. Look at the caution down below where it says if you are canning seafood, you will need to process these for 100 minutes. All right, so we're going to go ahead and ladle our soup into our jars, and we're going to leave a 1-inch headspace. If you guys need reminded as to what a 1-inch headspace is, on the bubble remover tool, there's a little 1 inch on here. There's different sizes for the different levels. And basically you're going to fill it up right to the bottom of that rim. This one's not quite full. We're going to put this in the fridge and have it for dinner tomorrow. Now we're going to take our bubble remover tool and just go around the inside. You're going to want to take a wet washcloth and wipe off the rims. This is to get off any kind of food so that your jars will seal. Place on your lids. Put on your rings and go ahead and put them in your canner. Now we're going to put on our canner lid. Just line up the arrow, lock it in. Use the opposite toggles to lock it down, just finger tight. And I'm going to turn this burner on about 8, and then we're going to wait for this to start venting. All right, so this has been venting for 10 minutes now. You can feel the air, you can hear it coming out. You want to make sure it vents for 10 minutes. You can also see our pressure started coming up a little. Now we're going to put the pressure gauge on for our location. It's 10 pounds of pressure. We're going to put it on the number 10. Just like that, and then we're going to let this come up to 10 pounds of pressure, and that's when we're going to start our timer. All right, so our pressure is up to 10 pounds of pressure. Now we're going to start our timer for 75 minutes or an hour and 15 minutes. I'm going to set the timer. And now we're just going to keep an eye on the gauge. Usually this will continue to climb if you keep it at the same temperature, so I start to turn it down just a little bit. My range goes from low up to high, and I usually start it off on 8, so I'm going to bump this down to 6, and I'm just going to keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't get too high, and I'll probably likely move it down somewhere around 4 or 5, just to make sure that it stays above 10 but it doesn't climb too high. All right, so our hour and 15 minutes is up. All we're going to do is turn off our timer and turn off our stovetop, and we're just going to leave this come all the way down to 0, have the pressure come down to 0. All right, now that the pressure went all the way down to 0, now we're going to remove the weight. And then we're going to let it vent for another 10 minutes before we remove our jars. All right, we've let it vent for 10 minutes. Now we're going to remove the lid and take out our jars. You're just going to remove it the same way as you put it on, opposite toggles. Now you're just going to remove the lid. Make sure you tilt it away from you so you don't get steam burnt. And then we're going to take a towel and put it on our countertop. To put our jars on. And then we take them out. And that's it. We're just going to leave them sit here on our countertop until they seal. And then once they are sealed, we're going to remove the rings, wash them down, make sure there's no food stuck on the outside, make sure we label them what they are and the date. And then I'm going to put them down in the pantry with all the other ones, and we're going to have some good soup throughout the winter. I think I probably canned, I want to say somewhere around 35 quarts of soup. And each one of these quarts will typically feeds 2 people. So that's quite a bit of meals for having soup, and it's really easy to go down and open one up. So there you go, guys. That's how you can soup. Again, you can use any recipe just as long as you follow those tips and leave those ingredients out that I told you not to put in, such as the rice and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, when you go to open these up and reheat them, that's when you can add your milk, that's when you can add your pasta, you can add your thickeners then. So super simple to do. And that's it. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, leave them down below. I'll try to answer as best I can. Again, if you guys have never canned before, make sure you refer to our Canning 101 video first. In particular, I get a lot of questions about leaving the rings on in storage and stuff like that. We cover all that in the Canning 101 video. And if you guys have any tips or tricks of your own for canning, leave them down below. I want to hear from you guys. And that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.